Harriet Tubman was born Araminta Ross on the evening of January 29, 1822, in Dorchester County, Maryland, on a plantation owned by the Brodess family. Tubman's birth came at a time when the institution of slavery was deeply entrenched in the southern United States, and her life would be shaped by its oppressive grip from the very beginning. The exact details of her birth are shrouded in mystery, with different accounts suggesting she may have been born anywhere between 1820 and 1825. Regardless of the exact date, Tubman's early years were defined by the harsh realities of slavery, and it was within this context that her story began to unfold. Her parents, Harriet "Rit" Green and Benjamin Ross, were both enslaved people. Rit, who was of African descent, had been born into slavery, and Benjamin, her father, was a skilled woodsman, which granted him a certain level of autonomy compared to other enslaved people. Despite this, he too was bound by the chains of slavery, a system that allowed no black person, free or enslaved, to claim true liberty. Harriet's family was large, and the dynamics of enslavement shaped her early experiences and relationships. She was one of 9 children, and although they shared a familial bond, they were also separated due to the nature of slavery, which often scattered family members across different plantations or sales. From a young age, Harriet was subjected to the brutalities of slavery. She worked in the fields, assisting with the grueling tasks of harvesting crops and taking care of the land. Slavery in Maryland was not confined to one set of duties. Enslaved individuals, particularly women like Harriet, were often tasked with a multitude of labor, including domestic duties, field work, and sometimes even dangerous chores that took a toll on their physical health. For Harriet, these early years would serve as a foundational part of her understanding of both the physical and psychological toll of slavery, an experience that would later fuel her resolve to fight for freedom. In addition to the physical labor, Harriet's early life was marked by violence. She was subjected to whippings and beatings from her owners and overseers, experiences that would become all too familiar in her lifetime. At one point, when Harriet was around 12 years old, she was struck in the head by a heavy metal weight, thrown by an overseer who was angry with another enslaved person. This injury would cause her lifelong health problems, including seizures and narcoleptic episodes, which made her struggle with constant physical pain. The harshness of her environment and the lack of care or concern for her well-being would undoubtedly leave lasting scars, both physically and emotionally. During this period, Harriet's exposure to the cruelty of slavery was compounded by a growing awareness of her own desire for freedom. At one point, she became involved in a daring act of defiance when she refused to obey the orders of an overseer who attempted to force her to help restrain another enslaved person who was trying to escape. Harriet's resistance, even at such a young age, was a foreshadowing of the courage she would later display in her efforts to liberate herself and others. The early experiences of violence and oppression shaped her fierce determination and sparked the seeds of resistance. However, it was not only through personal hardship that Tubman's relationship with slavery was defined. The institution itself was built on the exploitation and dehumanization of black people, and Tubman's exposure to this system would shape her perspective on freedom. She was keenly aware of the value of human life in the context of slavery, where enslaved people were viewed as property to be bought and sold at the whims of their owners. The reality of being viewed as property rather than a human being will be one of the many injustices Tubman would fight against throughout her life. When Harriet was about 25 years old, her life took a decisive turn. In 1844, she married a free black man named John Tubman, and she adopted the name Harriet in honor of her mother. Although Harriet had married John, her life as an enslaved person continued to be marked by a sense of confinement. Her husband, being a free man, could not protect her from the reach of the Brodess family, and they were not able to build a life together in the ways that free couples might have been able to do. Harriet's situation seemed hopeless, as she continued to be subjected to the cruelty of slavery, but the hope for freedom began to stir within her. In the year 1849, Harriet's owner, Edward Brodess, passed away, and the family's estate was divided. During this time, Harriet learned that she would be sold to another owner, a fate she could not accept. Desperate and fearful of being separated from her family and her husband, she made the bold decision to escape. She had heard of other enslaved people who had found their way to freedom through the Underground Railroad, a network of safe houses and abolitionists who assisted runaway slaves. Harriet made the courageous choice to leave everything behind and embark on a journey that would forever change her life. On the night of her escape, Harriet slipped away from the Brodess plantation, leaving behind her husband, her family, and everything she had ever known. Armed only with the hope of freedom and the knowledge she had gained about the Underground Railroad, she made her way north, facing dangers and uncertainties at every turn. Her journey was treacherous, and it required not only physical endurance, but also the courage to navigate a system that was designed to track down and punish escapees. For the first time in her life, Harriet felt the weight of the chains of slavery fall away as she stepped into the unknown, her heart filled with hope and fear in equal measure. The escape to freedom marked the beginning of a new chapter in Tubman's life, but it was also the culmination of years of suffering, resistance, and longing for liberation. Harriet's early life and experiences in slavery had shaped her indomitable will and had laid the groundwork for her future role as one of the most important figures in American history. It was in the crucible of these formative years that the foundation for her courage, leadership, and unwavering commitment to freedom was forged. This chapter of her life, though marked by brutality and pain, was ultimately the starting point for a journey that would inspire generations to come. Harriet Tubman's journey toward becoming one of the most iconic figures in American history was shaped not only by her early experiences of enslavement, but also by the awakening of a deep, unyielding desire for freedom. This desire did not emerge overnight. Rather, it was a slow and painful evolution that was catalyzed by a series of formative experiences and realizations. While Harriet's early life in slavery instilled in her the stark realities of oppression, it was her conscious decision to seek freedom and eventually lead others toward it that would define her role in the fight for abolition. As a young woman enslaved on the Brodess plantation, Harriet's first exposure to the possibility of freedom came when she heard stories of other enslaved people escaping through the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad was a clandestine network of safe houses, abolitionists, and sympathizers that helped enslaved individuals flee to the North, where they could live free from the laws that bound them in the South. For Harriet, the stories of those who escaped were both a source of hope and a catalyst for her own desire to break free from the chains of enslavement. They proved to her that the seemingly insurmountable barriers of slavery could be overcome with determination and courage. Harriet's awareness of the possibility of escape gave rise to her first glimmer of resistance. She began to question the legitimacy of the system that bound her and other enslaved people, and this questioning would evolve into a profound sense of moral outrage. Tubman's early experiences with violence, injustice, and separation from her family contributed to the development of a personal conviction that slavery was not only an institution of economic exploitation, but also a system of profound moral and spiritual corruption. Her exposure to the cruelty of her masters, the disregard for her humanity, and the dehumanizing effects of enslavement sparked an internal rebellion that would define her character for the rest of her life. The turning point for Harriet came in 1849, when she learned that her enslaver, Edward Brodess, had died. Following his death, his widow, Eliza Brodess, made the decision to sell off much of the family's enslaved property, including Harriet. At this moment, Harriet knew that she faced the grim possibility of being sold far away from her family. This would mean a permanent separation from those she loved, perhaps even the loss of any hope of ever seeing them again. For Tubman, the realization that she was still subject to the whims of a system that considered her little more than property was a profound and sobering reminder of her lack of control over her own life. Faced with the possibility of a cruel and unrelenting future under another owner, Harriet made a decision that would change her life forever. She would escape. At the age of 27, she resolved to flee, relying on the hope that freedom was not just a dream, but a real possibility. In the middle of the night, Harriet made her break for freedom, guided by the conviction that there was no future for her in slavery. Her escape was not only an act of personal liberation, but also a radical declaration of defiance against the institution that sought to subjugate her and millions of others. The actual journey to freedom was a dangerous and arduous process. Harriet had to rely on the Underground Railroad, a network of secret routes and safe houses led by abolitionists and sympathizers who provided shelter and assistance to runaway slaves. The path was fraught with challenges. There were patrollers and bounty hunters who scoured the countryside searching for runaways, and the physical toll of traveling long distances by foot, often in harsh weather conditions, added to the already daunting risks. Yet, Tubman's determination to break free from the system of enslavement gave her the strength and resilience to endure these hardships. Her early experiences with physical pain and hardship, which had been inflicted on her during her time in slavery, now transformed into the fuel that propelled her forward. Tubman's escape was fraught with moments of uncertainty, as she was unsure who she could trust and where she could find safe refuge. Yet, she found solace in the knowledge that her destination was freedom. With each step she took toward the north, Harriet became more resolute, not only in her desire for personal freedom, but in her commitment to help others achieve the same. The fear of being caught and returned to slavery never left her, but Tubman was driven by a powerful vision of liberation that transcended her own plight. Her escape was no longer just about securing her own safety. It was about making a statement that slavery could be overcome and that the bonds of servitude could be shattered. Upon reaching Pennsylvania, Tubman was officially free. Yet, her sense of liberation was not simply a matter of physical distance from the plantation. The emotional weight of her escape was equally significant. For the first time in her life, Harriet was able to make decisions for herself, to chart her own course in a world that had long denied her autonomy. Still, she felt a deep sense of responsibility for those left behind. Her mind immediately turned to her family, and the idea of helping them and others like them escape slavery became a driving force in her life. Harriet's first act as a free woman was not to settle into the comforts of liberty, but to return to Maryland to rescue her family. She knew the risks. She could be caught and punished, and the journey would be dangerous. But the thought of leaving her loved ones behind was unbearable. She successfully brought her sister, her brothers, and other members of her family to freedom, and each journey back to the South was more than just a rescue mission. It was a declaration of her personal commitment to fight for the freedom of others. She returned again and again, making multiple trips over the course of a decade to help enslaved people escape, earning the nickname Moses for leading her people out of bondage. Tubman's early experiences as an escapee marked the beginning of her transformation into a full-fledged abolitionist and leader. The obstacles she faced during her escape solidified her resolve and sharpened her skills in navigating the complexities of the Underground Railroad. Her success in rescuing her family and others was not only a triumph of courage and perseverance, but also a demonstration of her growing leadership abilities. Harriet's evolution from an enslaved woman into a freedom fighter was not instantaneous. It was a process that required not only physical strength, but mental fortitude and moral clarity. She had not only escaped slavery, but she had also become a symbol of hope for those still in bondage. As Tubman's understanding of the horrors of slavery deepened, so too did her commitment to fighting the system. Her experience of liberation, first through her own escape and later through her work on the Underground Railroad, transformed her from a survivor into a leader in the abolitionist movement. Harriet Tubman's decision to escape from slavery in 1849 marked not only a pivotal moment in her own life, but also the beginning of her transformation into one of the most remarkable figures in the history of American abolitionism. Her first escape was not merely a flight from physical bondage. It was the beginning of a lifelong commitment to freedom, both for herself and for countless others. As Tubman embarked on this perilous journey, she demonstrated a rare combination of courage, resourcefulness, and an unshakable belief in the possibility of liberation, traits that would define her for the rest of her life. The immediate catalyst for Harriet's escape was the looming threat of being sold to another owner after the death of her enslaver, Edward Brodess. This prospect filled her with dread, not only because it meant potential separation from her family, but also because it represented a final confirmation of her status as property, rather than as a human being. Harriet's desire for freedom was born out of the visceral experience of being treated as less than human and the crushing weight of knowing that, as an enslaved person, she had no autonomy over her own future. Faced with the possibility of being sold away from everything she knew, she made the brave decision to flee, fully aware of the immense risks involved in such an act of defiance. The first step in her escape was to leave the Brodess plantation without being detected. Harriet's knowledge of the land, gained from years of working on the plantation and from the stories of those who had escaped before her, was invaluable in plotting her route. She carefully avoided the patrols that scoured the countryside for runaways, knowing that any misstep could result in capture and severe punishment. Her only companion on this journey was the hope of a future free from the constant fear of being sold or separated from her loved ones. Harriet's escape, however, was not a solitary act. It was part of the broader movement of enslaved people seeking liberation through the Underground Railroad, a network that, although secret and fragmented, offered the possibility of freedom for those daring enough to seek it. The Underground Railroad was not a single route or organization, but a loosely connected system of safe houses, secret routes, and individuals, abolitionists, free black people, and sympathetic whites, who worked together to help enslaved people escape the South. Harriet had heard of the railroad from other enslaved individuals who had successfully made their way to freedom, and her resolve to use it was strengthened by the knowledge that there were others who had achieved what she dreamed of. The journey itself, however, was fraught with danger. The fugitive slave laws that existed at the time allowed for the capture and return of runaway slaves, even in free states, and bounty hunters were often willing to stop at nothing to track down and return escaped individuals for a reward. Despite these risks, Harriet's deep conviction and the urgency of her circumstances gave her the courage to venture into the unknown. Her escape route led her northward through the vast, unforgiving landscape of the eastern United States. The journey was a grueling one, marked by uncertainty, exhaustion, and fear. Tubman traveled by night to avoid detection, using the cover of darkness to conceal her movements and evade the authorities. During the day, she would hide in barns, basements, or other safe spaces, relying on the kindness and secrecy of the abolitionists and free blacks who offered her shelter along the way. One of the challenges Harriet faced during her escape was the sheer distance she needed to travel in order to reach freedom. From her home in Maryland, she made her way to Philadelphia, a key stop on the Underground Railroad. The city was a beacon of hope for enslaved people, as it was located in a free state and had a thriving abolitionist community. Here, Harriet found temporary respite, but the struggle was far from over. While in Philadelphia, Tubman had the opportunity to reflect on her journey and contemplate the long road ahead. Her escape from slavery was a momentous achievement, but the sense of freedom she sought was still elusive. She was far from her family and had no assurance that they would ever be able to join her in the North. In Philadelphia, Harriet made an important decision. She would not allow herself to enjoy the privileges of freedom without first securing the liberation of those she left behind. Despite the personal risks, she was driven by the unshakable conviction that she could not, in good conscience, remain free while her loved ones remained in bondage. This decision marked a significant shift in her thinking. No longer was her fight solely for her own freedom. It was for the freedom of her family, and by extension, for all those who suffered under the system of slavery. This sense of duty, combined with her knowledge of the Underground Railroad, would lead her to return to Maryland in 1850, determined to rescue her family and others trapped in the chains of slavery. Harriet's first trip back to Maryland was fraught with danger. The risk of capture was ever present, and each step she took was a step closer to facing the consequences of being caught. Yet, Tubman's courage and resourcefulness saw her through. She successfully brought her sister, Lina, and her 2 children to freedom, and later returned for her brothers and other individuals trapped in the brutal system of slavery. Each return trip further solidified her status as a leader and symbol of hope for those seeking to escape the South. Her reputation as a fearless conductor of the Underground Railroad grew, and she became known for her ability to navigate the complexities of the railroad and outwit the bounty hunters and patrols sent to capture runaways. By the time Harriet Tubman had made several trips back to Maryland to rescue others, her resolve had deepened. The sense of urgency that had marked her own escape was now matched by her commitment to liberating others. The personal risks she faced in these journeys were considerable, yet Tubman was undeterred. Her ability to lead others to freedom, often through dangerous and unfamiliar terrain, was a testament to her remarkable leadership and tactical skills. She understood the intricacies of the Underground Railroad and employed a network of safe houses, coded messages, and other strategies to guide her passengers to safety. Harriet's first escape, though fraught with danger and uncertainty, was the beginning of a larger movement, one in which she played an instrumental role in dismantling the system of slavery. Tubman's actions were not only a response to her personal suffering, but were part of a broader strategy to undermine the institution of slavery by providing enslaved people with the means to escape. Her actions exemplified the power of self-determination and the courage it took to act in defiance of an entire system built on exploitation and injustice. Her journey from slavery to freedom was not merely a physical one. It was a transformative experience that shaped her into a leader, strategist, and symbol of resistance. The challenges she faced, the risks she took, and the lives she changed along the way were all critical components of her path to becoming the legendary figure known as Moses of the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman's first escape was not just the start of her personal liberation, but the beginning of a legacy that would inspire future generations of freedom fighters. After Harriet Tubman's own daring escape from slavery in 1849, her life took a transformative turn. The very courage that allowed her to flee the brutal institution of slavery propelled her into a pivotal role in the abolitionist movement. The knowledge and experience she gained during her own journey to freedom became the foundation upon which she would build her mission to help others escape as well. Her decision to return to the South to rescue her family marked the beginning of her new identity as a leader and a conductor of the Underground Railroad, and her tireless work to liberate enslaved people would earn her the nickname Moses for leading her people out of bondage. One of the defining characteristics of Tubman's leadership on the Underground Railroad was her unwavering commitment to returning to the South to help those still enslaved. Despite the danger she faced every time she crossed into the slaveholding states, Tubman's sense of duty to free others was stronger than any personal fear. Her understanding of the suffering caused by slavery, combined with her unyielding desire to provide the same hope she had once received, motivated her to risk her life repeatedly. Tubman's commitment to liberating others is perhaps best exemplified by her decision to rescue not only her family members, but also other enslaved individuals. She was driven by a powerful sense of responsibility, believing that freedom could not truly be realized unless it was shared. Tubman's remarkable ability to guide enslaved individuals to freedom rested on her deep knowledge of the Southern landscape, gained during her years as an enslaved person. This intimate understanding of geography, combined with her cunning ability to outwit pursuers, allowed her to successfully navigate dangerous terrain while avoiding detection. She knew the secret paths, the hiding places, and the communities that could provide sanctuary for those on the run. This knowledge became an essential part of her work on the Underground Railroad, enabling her to create routes that were not only efficient but also safe. Her ability to plan and strategize allowed her to minimize risks, ensuring that the people she led to freedom had a greater chance of survival. One of the most important aspects of Harriet's role in the Underground Railroad was her ability to build and maintain trust among those she assisted. The journey to freedom was not only physically demanding, but emotionally taxing, as those escaping from slavery had to rely on the unknown. Tubman's strength, leadership, and reputation for safety made her a beacon of hope for those desperate to escape. Her unwavering confidence and determination provided the psychological strength that her passengers needed, even in the face of adversity. She reassured them that freedom was possible, guiding them step by step toward their ultimate destination. Tubman's first rescue mission was both a personal and a tactical success. She brought her sister and her sister's children to freedom, traveling along the Underground Railroad's secret routes and using trusted contacts to provide shelter and food. After this successful mission, Tubman made the difficult decision to return to the South for the next group of enslaved people who needed help. Her journeys continued throughout the early 1850s, and with each return to the South, her understanding of the Underground Railroad's infrastructure deepened. She cultivated relationships with abolitionists, free blacks, and sympathetic whites who were willing to risk their lives to assist her and the people she led. Her work on the Underground Railroad was characterized not only by the number of people she freed, but also by the breadth of her network. Tubman became an expert in creating safe havens and in navigating a system of routes that spanned across several states, including Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New York. The secrecy of these routes was paramount to their success, and Harriet's meticulous planning and discretion ensured that information about the escapees was never divulged to those who could jeopardize their freedom. It was this careful balance of secrecy and openness, of trust and caution, that allowed Tubman to operate successfully under constant threat. One of the most remarkable aspects of Tubman's work on the Underground Railroad was her ability to outsmart the bounty hunters and slave catchers who were constantly on the lookout for runaway slaves. While the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 made it even more dangerous for escaped slaves, forcing abolitionists in the northern states to return fugitives to their southern masters, Tubman remained undeterred. Her intimate knowledge of the land and her ability to move quietly through it allowed her to evade detection, often at great personal risk. Her determination to see her passengers to freedom, no matter the odds, became legendary, and her ability to defy the system of slavery time and again earned her the respect and admiration of both her contemporaries and future generations. Tubman's successes in freeing enslaved people were not without their struggles. Each mission carried with it the potential for failure, and the consequences of failure were dire. The danger of being captured and returned to slavery loomed over her, but Tubman was determined to see her work through. She often had to make difficult decisions, such as whether to continue a mission when faced with obstacles or to turn back for the safety of the group. On several occasions, she encountered individuals who hesitated or feared the journey, and she had to motivate them to continue or leave them behind for their own safety. Tubman's ability to make quick, decisive choices in moments of peril was an essential quality that made her such a successful conductor on the Underground Railroad. In addition to her practical skills, Tubman's success was also rooted in her profound sense of justice and moral clarity. For Harriet, the fight against slavery was not just a political issue. It was a matter of right and wrong. Her belief in the inherent dignity and equality of all people was central to her commitment to the abolitionist cause. Tubman's sense of spiritual righteousness was also deeply intertwined with her work, and she often spoke of a divine calling to help free those who were enslaved. She believed that she was guided by a higher power, and this belief sustained her through the many trials she faced. Her unwavering faith in her mission allowed her to confront the dangers of her work with courage and resolve. By the time Tubman completed her final rescue mission in 1860, she had personally guided over 70 people to freedom. Her reputation as one of the most successful and daring conductors of the Underground Railroad spread across the nation, and she became a symbol of resistance to the institution of slavery. Tubman's impact was not limited to her work with the Underground Railroad. Her activism extended to her involvement in the broader abolitionist movement, where she worked alongside other prominent figures like Frederick Douglass and John Brown. She was not just a rescuer of individuals, but also a tireless advocate for the abolition of slavery, believing that the fight for freedom was a collective effort that required the support and involvement of all. The nickname Moses, which was given to Tubman by the people she helped, was a testament to the extraordinary leadership and courage she demonstrated. Just as the biblical Moses led the Israelites to freedom, so too did Harriet Tubman lead her people out of the physical and psychological enslavement that had bound them for generations. Harriet Tubman's legacy as a conductor of the Underground Railroad is well known, but her contributions to the abolitionist cause did not end with her work rescuing enslaved people. As the United States descended into civil war, Tubman's sense of duty to fight for the freedom of all enslaved people became even more pressing. Though she was already celebrated for her bravery and leadership, Harriet's willingness to step into new and dangerous roles during the Civil War cemented her reputation as a figure of unmatched courage and dedication. Her participation in the war effort highlighted not only her continued commitment to the abolitionist cause, but also her capacity for strategic thinking, military engagement, and her deep sense of justice. With the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861, Tubman saw an opportunity to expand her efforts and contribute directly to the Union's war effort. Her previous work with the Underground Railroad had given her an unparalleled understanding of the geography of the Southern states, including key military and slaveholding territories. Recognizing the importance of this knowledge, Tubman offered her services to the Union Army, eager to play a more active role in the fight against slavery. Her expertise in navigating the South, her firsthand experience of the plight of enslaved people, and her deep understanding of the Southern culture and infrastructure made her an invaluable asset to the Union forces. In 1862, Tubman was officially recruited by the Union Army and assigned to work with the Combahee River Expedition in South Carolina. Her role was multifaceted. She served as a cook, nurse, and spy, but her greatest contribution came as a scout and guide. Tubman's extensive knowledge of the land allowed her to lead Union troops through unfamiliar and treacherous terrain, helping them to evade Confederate forces. Her ability to move through the South with relative ease, thanks to her experience navigating secret routes as part of the Underground Railroad, made her a highly sought-after figure within military. Perhaps the most significant moment of Tubman's military service occurred during the Combahee River Raid in 1863, an operation aimed at freeing enslaved people in the South. Tubman was integral to the success of this mission, guiding Union troops through the marshes and waterways of South Carolina to a Confederate-held plantation, where they liberated more than 750 enslaved individuals. Tubman's role in the raid was not only a military triumph, but also a demonstration of her unparalleled ability to plan and execute complex operations. She successfully identified key areas to strike, ensuring that the operation would be carried out with minimal loss of life and maximum impact on the Confederacy's infrastructure. In addition to her logistical and strategic contributions, Tubman also played a crucial role in providing psychological support to the enslaved people she helped free. She understood that the physical liberation of the enslaved was only part of the battle. Emotional and mental liberation was equally important. Many of the individuals Tubman helped had lived their entire lives under the brutal and dehumanizing system of slavery. To them, freedom was not just a new reality. It was a foreign concept that they had difficulty fully grasping. Tubman's strength and calm demeanor helped to reassure the freed individuals, guiding them through the initial confusion and fear they felt after their release. Her role in providing emotional guidance and a sense of security during this period was just as important as her logistical work in the raid. Throughout the war, Tubman remained focused on her larger mission of eradicating slavery. She believed that the Union's victory was essential not just for the preservation of the nation, but for the liberation of all enslaved people. She worked tirelessly to ensure that the war's outcome would lead to the end of slavery and, ultimately, to the freedom of the millions who had been subjected to it. While Tubman's direct military role was pivotal, her broader impact on the war was felt in her work as an advocate for the enlistment of black soldiers. She believed that the participation of black men in the Union Army was crucial for ensuring that the war would end in true freedom for all enslaved people. Tubman used her influence to encourage black recruitment, understanding that the struggle for freedom was not just one of escape, but one that required active, organized resistance against the institution of slavery. Tubman's work during the Civil War also underscored the significant shift in her identity from a freed woman to a symbol of national significance. While she had been known as Moses for her work in freeing individual enslaved people, her role in the Civil War elevated her to the status of a national hero. Her courage on the battlefield and her tireless advocacy for black soldiers demonstrated her unrelenting commitment to the abolitionist cause. By the end of the war, Tubman had become an icon of the abolitionist movement, widely respected not only for her work as a spy and scout, but also for her unwavering belief in equality and justice. Despite the central role Tubman played in the Union Army, her contributions during the war were not widely recognized at the time. She faced the dual challenge of being a woman and a black person in a deeply segregated and sexist military structure. Tubman's work was often overshadowed by the contributions of her male counterparts, but her impact cannot be understated. She helped to change the very nature of what was considered possible for black women during the Civil War, demonstrating that they could not only contribute to the war effort, but lead it in meaningful and impactful ways. Tubman's service during the war also highlighted the critical importance of women in the abolitionist movement, showing that their roles were not confined to domestic spaces, but extended into the political and military arenas as well. The end of the Civil War in 1865 marked a turning point in Harriet Tubman's life, but it did not signal the end of her activism. She continued to advocate for the rights of formerly enslaved people, particularly in the areas of land ownership and economic independence. Her experience as a nurse and as a spy during the war had only deepened her commitment to social justice, and she spent the remainder of her life advocating for the rights of African Americans, women, and other marginalized groups. Tubman's work during the war had been vital in helping to secure the passage of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the United States. However, she recognized that legal freedom was not enough. The real work lay in ensuring that formerly enslaved individuals were able to thrive in a country that had long denied them the rights and opportunities of citizenship. Harriet Tubman's role in the Civil War exemplifies her courage, strategic mind, and unwavering commitment to the cause of freedom. Her work in the war was not only a continuation of her lifelong mission to end slavery, but also a testament to the remarkable resilience and strength of character that had defined her from her earliest years. After the Civil War ended in 1865 and slavery was abolished, Harriet Tubman's fight for justice did not cease. While the legal victory of the 13th Amendment, which emancipated all enslaved people, marked a significant turning point in American history, Tubman knew that legal freedom did not automatically equate to true liberty. The struggle for equality, justice, and opportunity for formerly enslaved individuals was just beginning. Tubman's post-war years were dedicated to securing land, economic independence, and political rights for African Americans, especially women. Her life during this period highlights the complexity of post-war life for Black Americans, especially women who, despite their integral role in the abolitionist movement, continued to face significant challenges. One of Tubman's most significant post-war pursuits was her effort to help formerly enslaved individuals find stability through land ownership. After the war, many freedmen and women were left without resources or any means of sustaining themselves. The promise of 40 acres and a mule, which had been made to former slaves by Union General William Tecumseh Sherman during the war, was largely unfulfilled, leaving many former slaves still impoverished and dependent on their former enslavers. Tubman, recognizing the importance of land as a means of economic independence, took it upon herself to secure land for Black families in the South. Tubman's efforts to secure land were not without obstacles. In the early 1860s, she managed to acquire property in Auburn, New York, where she had settled after the war. Tubman used this land to provide housing for herself and other freed African Americans. She also opened her home to others in need, including those who had fought for the Union during the war. Although she was never financially wealthy, Tubman's land ownership provided her with a degree of security and an opportunity to continue her work of advocacy. She recognized that securing land was crucial for Black Americans to establish themselves as independent citizens in a country that had once enslaved them. In addition to her land dealings, Tubman became a vocal advocate for women's suffrage and the broader women's rights movement. Her fight for equal rights was deeply informed by her own experiences as a woman of color. Despite her extraordinary contributions to the abolitionist movement and the Civil War, Tubman, like other women, was excluded from the full benefits of citizenship. Women, regardless of race, were denied the right to vote, and Tubman, a fervent believer in equality, worked tirelessly to change that. She participated in suffrage conventions and joined forces with leading suffragists such as Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, advocating for the rights of women, particularly Black women, to have a voice in the political system. Tubman's advocacy for women's rights, however, was not without challenges. In some instances, she found herself at odds with other suffragists who, though supportive of women's rights, were reluctant to push for the inclusion of Black women in the suffrage movement. This reluctance was rooted in the racial prejudices of the time, with some white suffragists fearing that advocating for Black women's rights would alienate the broader white suffrage movement. Tubman's insistence that Black women should have an equal say in the fight for their rights forced many to confront the uncomfortable intersections of race and gender in the struggle for equality. In these moments, Tubman's unwavering belief in justice and her recognition of the unique struggles faced by Black women shaped her activism. While Tubman worked tirelessly for women's rights, she did not limit her advocacy to gender alone. She also fought for the civil rights of Black Americans more broadly. Tubman became involved in various political efforts aimed at securing equal rights for African Americans, particularly in the realm of education. She believed that education was the key to empowerment and worked to ensure that Black children had access to schools in her community. Tubman's own education had been limited during her time in slavery, but she understood the importance of learning and encouraged others to pursue knowledge as a way to fight systemic oppression. Despite her continued activism, Tubman's post-war life was marked by financial struggles. While she had a deep sense of purpose and a strong will to continue her work, Tubman was never able to achieve financial stability. The years of slavery had deprived her of many opportunities to build wealth, and her later years were marked by economic hardship. In addition to her advocacy work, Tubman faced personal challenges, including the ongoing health issues she had sustained throughout her life, likely as a result of the physical abuse she endured during her time as an enslaved person. Tubman's financial difficulties were compounded by her difficulty in securing consistent employment or financial backing for the various causes she championed. Throughout these challenges, Tubman continued to embody the qualities that had defined her throughout her life: resilience, determination, and selflessness. She never wavered in her commitment to freedom and justice, even when faced with personal and financial hardships. In many ways, Tubman's post-war life mirrored the struggles of many African Americans during Reconstruction. While the abolition of slavery had ended the institution of bondage, the fight for true equality and opportunity was far from over. Tubman's efforts in securing land, advocating for women's rights, and pushing for civil rights helped to lay the groundwork for the civil rights movements that would follow. Her advocacy for equal rights was not limited to her time. Harriet Tubman's vision for justice extended beyond the Reconstruction period. She continued to speak out for the rights of African Americans, especially women, into her later years, recognizing that true freedom required not just the end of slavery, but the dismantling of the structures that continued to oppress Black people. Her continued commitment to social justice during this time laid the foundation for the civil rights movements of the 20th century, and her legacy continues to inspire activists today. Harriet Tubman's life after the Civil War was one of relentless pursuit of justice, equality, and opportunity for all. She refused to be complacent, even in the face of profound personal and societal challenges. While the abolition of slavery had freed millions, Tubman knew that the fight for equality was ongoing. Her efforts to secure land, advocate for women's suffrage, and ensure that Black Americans had access to education and political rights were vital components of her post-war legacy. Tubman's work laid the foundation for future movements, not just for African Americans, but for women and other marginalized groups who would continue to seek equality in the decades to come. Her life remains a testament to the enduring power of activism, and her vision of a more just and equal world continues to shape our collective aspirations. Harriet Tubman's life and work have left an indelible mark on American history, one that transcends the time in which she lived. Tubman's contributions to the abolitionist cause, her military service during the Civil War, and her tireless advocacy for women's rights and racial equality continue to shape the national conversation about freedom, justice, and civil rights. Her legacy is multifaceted, influencing not only the movement she directly engaged in, but also future generations of activists, leaders, and ordinary citizens who would take inspiration from her courage, resilience, and commitment to social change. The enduring nature of her impact reflects the universal and timeless relevance of the values she embodied: freedom, justice, and equality. In the years following her death in 1913, Tubman's legacy was gradually recognized, though it was not always fully appreciated during her lifetime. While she was known in her time as a hero in the fight for freedom, many of the details of her life and contributions remained obscured or underappreciated. It was only in the late 19th and early 20th centuries that a more comprehensive understanding of her work began to emerge, and Tubman's place in American history was secured. Historians, writers, and civil rights activists began to elevate her as a symbol of the abolitionist movement and as a figure of profound courage and moral clarity. One of the most significant aspects of Tubman's legacy is her role in the abolition of slavery. Her work on the Underground Railroad alone is legendary, as she is credited with personally guiding over 70 individuals to freedom, and many others indirectly benefited from her network. The impact of her work extended far beyond the immediate goal of freedom for enslaved people. She disrupted the institution of slavery by systematically dismantling the very system that sought to dehumanize and oppress Black individuals. Tubman's efforts helped to undermine the economic foundations of the South and significantly weakened the system of slavery, playing a critical role in the broader abolitionist movement. Tubman's ability to navigate the dangers of the Underground Railroad, evade capture, and free others from slavery also highlighted her deep understanding of the psychological and emotional aspects of oppression. She was not only a strategist and a leader, but also a source of inspiration and strength for the people she led. Her courage and empathy provided hope in the face of despair, allowing those she rescued to believe in their right to freedom. Her enduring message, that freedom is a fundamental human right that no one should be denied, continues to resonate today, reinforcing the belief that the fight for justice is both urgent and ongoing. In the broader context of the Civil War, Tubman's contributions to the Union cause were also pivotal in shaping her legacy. As a spy, nurse, and scout, her role in the war demonstrated her ability to adapt and excel in difficult and unfamiliar circumstances. Her leadership in the Combahee River Raid, which resulted in the liberation of more than 750 enslaved people, solidified her status as an extraordinary figure of American history. Tubman's involvement in the war was also a testament to her patriotism, showing that her commitment to the abolition of slavery extended beyond the Underground Railroad to the very heart of the Union war effort. Beyond her military and abolitionist work, Tubman's post-war advocacy for women's rights and civil rights is a key component of her enduring legacy. Despite the progress made by the 13th Amendment, the Emancipation Proclamation, and the eventual passage of the 15th Amendment, which granted Black men the right to vote, Tubman recognized that true equality had yet to be achieved. She worked relentlessly to secure land, educational opportunities, and political rights for African Americans, particularly women. Tubman's advocacy for women's suffrage, though not fully realized in her lifetime, laid the foundation for future feminist movements that would see the eventual extension of the vote to women, both black and white, in 1920 with the passage of the 19th Amendment. Her involvement in the suffrage movement also revealed her understanding of the intersectionality of race and gender. Tubman was not only a pioneering abolitionist and military leader, but also a champion for the rights of black women, who faced a unique set of challenges in a racially segregated and patriarchal society. Tubman's insistence that black women should be included in the conversation about suffrage and civil rights forced many to confront the inequalities they faced. This understanding of the importance of inclusive social justice continues to resonate in modern movements advocating for the rights of marginalized groups, such as black women, LGBTQ+ individuals, and other oppressed communities. Tubman's posthumous recognition as a national hero has grown steadily, culminating in numerous monuments, schools, and organizations named in her honor. For example, in 2016, the U.S. Treasury Department announced that Tubman would replace Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill, an honor that reflects her significance in American history and acknowledges the critical role that black women played in shaping the nation's history. The move was seen as a long overdue acknowledgement of Tubman's contributions to American society and a step forward in challenging the historical erasure of black figures from the country's narratives. Harriet Tubman's life and legacy have become a powerful symbol of resistance, resilience, and social justice. Her commitment to ending slavery, fighting for civil rights, and advocating for women's suffrage has inspired generations of activists and leaders. Her work exemplifies the kind of courage and moral conviction that are necessary to challenge oppressive systems, and her legacy continues to inspire those who are working toward a more just and equitable society today. Through her actions, Tubman demonstrated that one person, guided by a deep sense of purpose and equipped with the courage to confront injustice, can change the course of history. While Tubman's legacy is often celebrated, it is important to remember that her impact extends beyond her personal achievements. She was a part of a larger movement for freedom and equality that involved countless other individuals, many of whom have also been forgotten by history. Tubman's story, however, reminds us that these struggles are ongoing and that the fight for justice must continue. In this sense, Tubman's legacy serves not just as a historical example, but also as a call to action. Her life reminds us that freedom, equality, and justice are not guarantees, but ideals that require constant vigilance, effort, and sacrifice. Though Harriet Tubman passed away in 1913, her legacy continued to shape the trajectory of the fight for racial and gender equality in the United States. The 20th century, particularly the era of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s, saw a resurgence of interest in Tubman's life and work as activists and leaders sought to build on the foundation laid by abolitionists like her. Tubman's contributions to the abolition of slavery, her leadership during the Civil War, and her lifelong commitment to social justice became touchstones for those advocating for the rights of African Americans, women, and other marginalized groups. Her enduring influence during the civil rights movement is an example of how one individual's actions can ripple through history and inspire generations of activists to continue the fight for freedom and equality. During the early years of the civil rights movement, Harriet Tubman's example provided a moral and historical framework for those who sought to dismantle the systems of racial segregation and disenfranchisement that persisted in the United States, particularly in the South. Activists like Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and others who became icons of the movement were well aware of Tubman's role in the abolition of slavery, and many drew inspiration from her courage and determination. Tubman's role as a leader who took direct action in the fight for freedom aligned with the tactics and strategies of the civil rights movement, where individuals were willing to take bold stands in the pursuit of justice. Tubman's influence was particularly evident in the way she exemplified the power of direct action and civil disobedience. Her work on the Underground Railroad involved defying the law to rescue enslaved people, and she continued to challenge the status quo by working as a spy and scout for the Union Army during the Civil War. Similarly, The civil rights movement was marked by individuals who chose to defy discriminatory laws and practices, from sit-ins and bus boycotts to freedom rides and marches. In each of these actions, the activists were following in Tubman's footsteps, standing up against the oppressive systems that sought to maintain segregation and inequality. Tubman's life served as a blueprint for those who were willing to risk their safety and freedom to bring about social change. Tubman's legacy also resonated within the feminist movements that emerged alongside the civil rights movement. While she may not have been explicitly known as a feminist in her time, Tubman's activism for the rights of women, particularly black women, positioned her as a precursor to the modern feminist movement. Tubman's refusal to accept the marginalization of women within the broader struggle for racial equality was a key component of her activism. She understood that the fight for freedom could not be fully realized unless it was inclusive of both racial and gender equality. Her leadership in advocating for black women's rights, even when it was not popular or widely accepted, foreshadowed the feminist movements that would emerge later in the 20th century, where the intersection of race and gender would become a central issue. As the civil rights movement gained momentum in the 1950s and 1960s, Tubman became an icon of resistance. Her image and story were invoked in speeches, songs, and public discussions about the ongoing struggle for civil rights. Tubman represented not only the fight for freedom, but also the idea that individuals could make a difference, no matter how small or humble their beginnings. Her life was proof that even a woman born into slavery, with limited education and resources, could become a powerful force for change. Her ability to overcome adversity and her steadfast commitment to justice made her a symbol of hope and perseverance for civil rights leaders who were fighting against the deeply entrenched systems of racism and segregation. In addition to being a symbol of resistance, Tubman's legacy was also a call to action. Her story was used to galvanize activists, reminding them that the fight for freedom and equality was ongoing. Tubman's own life was a testament to the idea that activism requires not only passion and conviction, but also strategic thinking and a willingness to adapt to new circumstances. The civil rights movement, much like Tubman's work on the Underground Railroad, was not just about large, visible acts of resistance, but also about the quiet, everyday acts of defiance that chipped away at the systems of oppression. Tubman's life demonstrated that the fight for justice was not always dramatic or easy, but it was necessary, and it was worth it. The connection between Tubman's legacy and the civil rights movement was also reflected in the way her life was celebrated and memorialized. As the movement progressed, Tubman's image began to be more widely acknowledged as a central figure in the history of the fight for freedom. Her legacy was celebrated through literature, film, and public commemorations. Her story became part of the larger narrative of American resistance to injustice, and her name was invoked by countless leaders, particularly those advocating for racial justice and women's rights. Tubman's legacy was not only a historical reminder of the abolition of slavery, but also a source of strength and inspiration for those who were fighting against the ongoing oppression of African Americans and women in the 20th century. In the 1960s, organizations like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, used Tubman's life and work as a foundation for their campaigns. They saw in her not only a hero of the past, but also a model for action in their own struggles. Leaders of the civil rights movement understood that, like Tubman, they needed to be bold, strategic, and unwavering in their fight for equality. Tubman's ability to move through dangerous territory, guide others to safety, and organize her efforts with precision mirrored the work of the civil rights activists who used direct action and nonviolent resistance to challenge Jim Crow laws and fight for voting rights. Beyond the civil rights movement, Tubman's legacy continues to be reflected in modern-day activism. Her work as a leader who fought for the rights of the marginalized is often cited as an example of how to lead with both strength and compassion. In today's world, where issues such as systemic racism, economic inequality, and gender discrimination continue to plague society, Tubman's story serves as a reminder that the fight for justice is ongoing. Her influence can be seen in contemporary movements such as Black Lives Matter, which seek to dismantle systems of oppression and bring attention to the struggles of Black communities. Tubman's example of perseverance in the face of adversity remains a source of inspiration for activists who continue to challenge injustice and inequality in their own communities. As the centuries pass since Harriet Tubman's death in 1913, her legacy has become deeply ingrained in the fabric of American culture, not only through historical accounts, but also through literature, film, and education. Tubman's life and work have transcended the confines of academic texts and are now celebrated in popular culture as a symbol of resistance, courage, and the struggle for freedom. Her story has been told in numerous books, documentaries, plays, and films, each contributing to the broader understanding of her legacy. Moreover, her place in educational curricula has grown, making her a central figure in the teaching of American history, particularly in the context of slavery, the abolitionist movement, and civil rights. One of the ways in which Tubman's legacy has been preserved in popular culture is through literature. Numerous biographies, children's books, and novels have been written about her life. Perhaps one of the most famous is Harriet Tubman, The Moses of Her People by Sarah Bradford, first published in 1869. This biography, which was authorized by Tubman herself, presented her as a heroic figure who not only liberated slaves, but also fought for the rights of women and African Americans. The portrayal of Tubman as a maternal and almost saintly figure has endured over time, cementing her status as an American icon. Additionally, numerous fictional works have drawn on Tubman's life for inspiration, exploring her experiences and the broader issues of race, freedom, and resistance. Tubman's portrayal in film has been equally significant in shaping public perceptions of her. In 2019, the film Harriet, directed by Kasi Lemmons, brought Tubman's story to a global audience, highlighting both her heroic actions on the Underground Railroad and her internal struggles. The film, starring Cynthia Erivo, emphasized Tubman's determination, selflessness, and courage. It was a landmark moment in Tubman's posthumous recognition, making her more accessible to younger generations and non-historians alike. This film added layers to her story, portraying her not only as a leader, but also as a woman who had to navigate the challenges of her own identity as a Black woman in a deeply racist society. The success of the film proved that Tubman's legacy continues to resonate with people worldwide, demonstrating her timeless relevance in the global fight for equality and justice. Beyond books and films, Tubman's story is also told through music. Throughout history, Tubman has been the subject of many songs, both during her lifetime and in the years after her death. During the 19th century, spirituals and freedom songs that referenced Tubman's efforts on the Underground Railroad circulated among abolitionist circles. These songs were an important part of the abolitionist movement, reinforcing the message of liberation and solidarity. In the 20th and 21st centuries, Tubman has continued to be a subject of musical expression, with artists across genres invoking her name as a symbol of resistance. Tubman's influence in music underscores her lasting significance as a cultural figure whose story continues to inspire and resonate with those who fight for freedom. In addition to her presence in popular culture, Tubman's impact on education has been profound. Her life and work have become central to the study of American history, particularly in the context of slavery, abolition, and civil rights. Tubman is now a staple figure in K-12 education and college courses on American history, African American studies, and women's history. Educators use Tubman's story not only to teach about the abolitionist movement, but also to examine the broader themes of resistance, courage, and the quest for justice. Her role as a key figure in the struggle for equality provides a valuable teaching tool for discussing the ongoing struggles against systemic racism, gender inequality, and social injustice. Her inclusion in educational curricula has also helped to highlight the contributions of African American women to the nation's history. Tubman is often highlighted as a pioneering figure in both the abolitionist and women's rights movements, two causes that have historically been marginalized in traditional American historical narratives. Her prominence in classrooms challenges the erasure of Black women's roles in American history and offers students a more inclusive, comprehensive view of the nation's past. By studying Tubman, students are able to learn about the intersection of race, gender, and power, providing them with a deeper understanding of the historical forces that shaped the United States. Furthermore, the study of Tubman in education provides an opportunity to examine the complexities of leadership and resistance. Tubman's life challenges the traditional notion of heroism, offering a model of leadership that is both grounded in personal sacrifice and deeply connected to community. Her ability to navigate dangerous and oppressive systems, to lead others to freedom, and to do so while overcoming personal challenges, offers students a multifaceted understanding of what it means to be a leader. Tubman's story shows that leadership does not always come in the form of grand gestures or public accolades. Rather, it can be found in the quiet, determined actions of those who fight for justice in their everyday lives. The growing recognition of Tubman's contributions has also sparked calls to honor her in more tangible ways. In recent years, there has been a concerted effort to ensure that her story is properly commemorated in public spaces. One of the most significant examples of this recognition is the effort to place Tubman on the U.S. $20 bill. The Treasury Department's decision to replace Andrew Jackson with Tubman on the $20 bill, announced in 2016, is a symbolic victory for the legacy of Black Americans and women who have long been excluded from official representations of American history. Though the process has faced delays, the decision underscores the importance of acknowledging the contributions of marginalized groups to the nation's founding and growth. Public monuments and memorials to Tubman have also been established in various parts of the United States, further solidifying her place in the national consciousness. The Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historical Park in Maryland, for example, serves as a reminder of her vital role in the abolitionist movement and the Underground Railroad. Such sites not only honor Tubman's memory, but also provide an opportunity for visitors to learn about the broader context of slavery and abolition. These memorials offer a chance to reflect on the painful legacy of slavery and to celebrate the efforts of those who fought to end it. The growing attention to Harriet Tubman in popular culture and education is not just an act of remembrance. It is an important acknowledgement of the continuing relevance of her life and work. Tubman's legacy provides a powerful framework for addressing the ongoing struggles for racial and gender justice. Her example teaches the importance of resilience, the power of direct action, and the necessity of dismantling systems of oppression. Tubman's life serves as both a historical lesson and a call to action, reminding us that the fight for freedom and equality is far from over. Through the preservation of her memory in literature, film, music, and education, Harriet Tubman continues to inspire new generations to carry forward the work of justice that she began. Harriet Tubman's life exemplified resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity, and her work as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, as a Union spy, and as an advocate for women's rights and African American suffrage continues to shape the social and political landscape of the United States and the world today. Tubman's impact was not limited to her time, but transcended it, leaving a legacy that is deeply intertwined with the ongoing struggles for racial equality, gender justice, and human rights. Her remarkable life shows that the quest for freedom is a long and often difficult journey, but one that must be pursued with unwavering determination. Even though Tubman passed away over a century ago, the values she embodied, freedom, justice, and equality, continue to inspire activists, leaders, and ordinary citizens in their pursuit of a more just and inclusive society. The unfinished journey Tubman embarked upon remains a guiding force in the fight against oppression today. In many ways, Tubman's legacy is a call to action for those engaged in the current struggles for racial and gender justice. Though the abolition of slavery was a monumental achievement, it did not mark the end of inequality or racial injustice in America. Tubman's work on the Underground Railroad, which liberated hundreds of enslaved individuals, was only one part of a much broader struggle. The post-Reconstruction era, the Jim Crow laws, and the systemic discrimination that continued to permeate every facet of American society demonstrated that freedom was not fully realized for African Americans. Tubman, having witnessed the brutal realities of slavery firsthand, understood that achieving true freedom required more than just the legal end of slavery. It required a transformation of societal structures and norms. Today, activists continue to draw from her unwavering belief that true liberation is a multifaceted pursuit that involves dismantling systemic racism, addressing economic inequality, and expanding access to opportunities for marginalized communities. Tubman's life also continues to resonate within movements advocating for women's rights. In her time, Tubman was a vocal advocate for women's suffrage, though she did not live to see the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920, which granted women the right to vote. Nevertheless, her advocacy for women's rights and her refusal to accept the notion that women, particularly black women, should be excluded from the fight for justice helped to lay the groundwork for future feminist movements. Tubman understood the intersection of race and gender oppression, and she was unrelenting in her commitment to ensuring that black women had a place in the movement for equal rights. Today, her legacy lives on in contemporary feminist movements, which increasingly emphasize the importance of intersectionality, the idea that social identities such as race, gender, and class are interconnected and cannot be examined in isolation. Her work reminds us that social justice cannot be fully achieved unless it is inclusive of all people, regardless of their gender, race, or background. Tubman's relevance in contemporary movements, such as Black Lives Matter, is also an indication of her continued significance in the fight for racial justice. Black Lives Matter, which emerged in response to the police violence and systemic racism that disproportionately affect black people in the United States, has drawn inspiration from the civil rights movements of the past, including Tubman's work. Her life embodies the spirit of resistance that defines the modern struggle for racial justice. Just as Tubman risked her life to rescue enslaved people and challenge the system of slavery, modern activists risk their own safety to expose and combat racial violence, inequality, and discrimination. Tubman's legacy reinforces the idea that change is possible when individuals are willing to stand up against oppressive systems, even when the odds are stacked against them. The power of Tubman's example extends beyond the realm of activism. Her life is a profound testament to the transformative potential of the human spirit. Born into slavery, denied an education, and subjected to violence and deprivation, Tubman could have easily accepted her fate. Instead, she chose to fight, first for her own freedom and then for the freedom of others. Tubman's courage in the face of extreme danger is a reminder that individuals have the power to resist injustice, even in the most dire circumstances. Her life challenges the conventional understanding of power and authority, showing that true leadership is not determined by social status or material wealth, but by one's willingness to sacrifice for a cause greater than oneself. In a world where power is often equated with wealth, political influence, or social status, Tubman's life offers a radical reimagining of what it means to wield true power by standing up for what is right, regardless of personal cost. The values Tubman championed also continue to shape contemporary conversations about social justice. Her focus on community building, mutual aid, and collective action offers critical insights for today's activists. Tubman did not act alone in her fight for freedom. She was part of a vast network of abolitionists, both black and white, who worked together to dismantle slavery. Her success on the Underground Railroad was possible because of the many individuals who risked their lives to help enslaved people escape to freedom. Today, movements for racial and economic justice are similarly rooted in the idea of collective action, where individuals come together to challenge oppressive systems and demand change. Tubman's example teaches that collective struggle, solidarity, and shared vision are essential for achieving meaningful social change. Tubman's work also raises important questions about the role of government and law in achieving justice. While Tubman acted outside the law when she guided enslaved people to freedom, she did so in direct opposition to laws that were unjust and inhumane. Her actions call into question the idea that laws and institutions always serve justice. Tubman's life shows that there are times when the law must be challenged, and that true justice is not always synonymous with legal authority. This concept has been central to many social movements throughout history, from the civil disobedience of the abolitionists to the nonviolent protests of the civil rights movement and the ongoing protests against systemic racism today. Tubman's willingness to break the law for a moral cause challenges contemporary ideas about obedience, justice, and the role of state power in shaping society. Furthermore, Tubman's legacy is a reminder of the importance of preserving history and acknowledging the contributions of those who have been marginalized. Tubman's story was often overlooked during her lifetime, and her contributions were not fully recognized by the mainstream historical narrative. Over time, however, efforts have been made to rectify this omission, ensuring that her story is told and that her legacy is properly honored. This process of reclaiming history is an important part of ongoing efforts to create a more inclusive, just society. By recognizing the contributions of individuals like Tubman, whose work was often ignored or minimized, society acknowledges the importance of diverse voices in shaping the nation's history and future. Today, Tubman's legacy also serves as a symbol of hope for future generations. Her life is proof that no matter how insurmountable the obstacles may seem, the fight for justice is always worth pursuing. Tubman's unyielding belief in the possibility of freedom, even in the darkest moments, continues to inspire those who are engaged in the ongoing struggle for racial, gender, and economic justice. Her life encourages us to keep pushing forward, even when the road ahead seems uncertain or difficult. In every act of resistance, in every fight for equality, Tubman's spirit lives on, reminding us that the journey toward justice is ongoing and that each step taken in the pursuit of freedom is part of a larger, unbroken tradition of resistance and change. Harriet Tubman's journey is far from complete. Her life serves as both a testament to the progress made in the fight for justice and a reminder of the work that remains to be done. The issues she fought against, slavery, racism, and inequality, remain pressing challenges in contemporary society. However, her legacy continues to provide a moral compass for those who are engaged in the ongoing struggle for justice. As long as the fight for freedom, equality, and human dignity persists, Harriet Tubman's journey will continue to inspire and guide us, offering the promise that a better, more just world is possible if we are willing to carry her torch forward.